So excited to talk to Michelle Walsh. We were just chatting in the green room over there, and I, like, just in the 2 minutes when I burst into the room, I'm like, hello, it's so nice to meet you, finally. I was like, she is my people. So by the end of this conversation, you will feel uplifted and happy and excited and hopeful about all the amazing work that UNICEF does and what her team is doing to really make a change around the world. So,
way to set a high bar. Thanks. And we just walked in. We were talking in the green room. Allison, so excited to follow you. I'm a longtime chief member, fantastic organization.
Amazing.
And we were saying, I think she was listening in to our conversation,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Curious.
Talk to people. Ask
Yes.
a lot of questions. So we're going to get right into it. And I think most important is being able to learn more about you and about your why. I think understanding your why, what makes you tick. But, you know, tell us about yourself, your role as the Chief Philanthropy Officer, and what inspires you, your mission in the work that you do for serving women and children globally.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm going to do a little bit of a swirl back and forth here to try and make sure I get to see all of you. But for me, I think the mission is the easy answer, right? Children generally. I have 3 children at home. I care about children. But I think well before I was a mom, I really sort of uniquely felt the unique vulnerability of children and the unique opportunity of the future ahead. And I think we probably all do, whether we have kids or not. But there's also the intellectual side, I think, that I've unpacked over the course of my career, which is to really understand what that means, the unique vulnerability and the unique moment in time that children are in their lives. Mm-hmm. And most of us are at different points, right, than our early childhood years. And UNICEF, to me, has that very unique ability to bring that intellectual, really smart, academic thinking to how we address the unique needs of children, and also sort of understand at the core they're human beings, right? The mission of what that means for kids. So I'm just going to try and maybe share how UNICEF works through an example. I think most of you are aware there was an earthquake in Myanmar about a week or so ago. It was actually 4 days after I was personally in Thailand. So I connected back with colleagues and was trying to understand what was going on there. And imagine 10 minutes from now, before the break, but during our conversation, there were an earthquake here. What would you do? What would you think about? Besides like looking around the room and figuring out your immediate safety, I know I would think about, where are my kids? Are they safe, right? I would also think, where's my husband? But I would think of them first. And you would think of yourselves and people you love, whether they're kids or adults or whomever, and you want to make sure that they're safe, right? Think about uniquely how a child would have to navigate that. What does that mean if they're not with an adult? Okay? And so UNICEF, I think, is uniquely skilled at understanding that. What do children need in that moment? Whether it's a tsunami or an earthquake or conflict, how do you keep children safe? Adults matter too, not to say that they don't, but there's a unique context that I think we intellectually sometimes forget. We feel it. And so connecting those two things to me is so much of why I'm here. You need to make sure that children, right, have food, access to food, that they have a physical place to go, that they're safe with an adult, right? So all of those things take pre-planning. They take relationships on the ground. You can't then swoop it. Like if an earthquake took place, people can't then just come in and help. We can ask for help at some point. But you first need to know who's there, who knows the lay of the land, who knows that we have a plan to do those things. And UNICEF does that in 190 countries around the world. I mean, think about like the hundreds of millions of children. And with 400 million children living in conflict right now, you have to think about one kid and what that kid means, whether it's your kid or someone else's kid. And you also have to understand how to do that at scale. And so doing that really smart and also sort of like holding the compassion. So I get to be in this unique place to be curious, to listen, to talk to people about how they can be a part of that. And so it's a really unique space to be in philanthropy and be talking to the private sector about it.
That's right. Thank you for that. And to add to your secret sauce, you do it with courage. You do it with heart, right? Because we wouldn't all be here as adults if we didn't have a journey as a child, right? So we can all relate and connect. So there's such power in what you're doing because we want them to grow up to be successful adults and have healthy and hopeful lives, right? So thank you for connecting your why for us. All right, so the next question. The landscape of global humanitarian aid has drastically shifted with recent funding cuts, right? So how has UNICEF USA adjusted its strategy to continue serving women and children around the world? Tell us about your decision making, the strategies that you use, your process.
So much has changed, and yet there's nothing particularly new. We work in 190 countries. Think about all the leaders globally and the complex political environments and the shifting of funds and shifting of decisions and power dynamics and all of what takes place in any government anywhere. And so this is not a new situation for us to unpack, but there are things that have changed, right? And part of why I'm really excited to talk to you is that when things change, you have to innovate.
Yes.
You don't do the same thing, or you won't be as successful. You could, and you could probably have some impact, right? But you have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to innovate. And some of what we've done on the philanthropy team is to really think about what are the intersections of partnership that will help us do that. And it's been a really powerful opportunity to talk about flexibility of funding. Yeah. So what happens, right, and if you think about that earthquake situation, the earthquake may be epicenter somewhere, and there's one geographic area that's really hard hit, all the schools aren't there, and then another area where they don't have access to water. If you have a funder that wants to only give you nutrition supplies or invest in education, you can't pivot, right? So we've known that for a long time. But I think this moment has allowed us to have a much bigger conversation about what that means, right? Like maybe Myanmar actually has some of the infrastructure in place to respond in a way that they're not able to in Syria where they're facing conflict. We have such expertise, such data collection, such understanding of the unique context on the ground that the opportunity to be able to pivot and use what we know to do what's best and most effective for children, we can communicate about it. We should be accountable, right? But to not predetermine that so that we're not able to pivot, I think has just been a really good space for us as a philanthropy team to innovate. And on the program side, we've really come together in a much stronger partnership to understand and help allocate where we're having conversations. So we had talked about this, that there are so many things that people could do, but I think we've just had a unique broad-scale conversation. We've always known that our $100 donors, our $1,000 donors are really important to us. But I think there's a real appreciation for the importance of large-scale support, meaning wide, many, many people doing different things, taking actions, being a part of it, and then a big gift that we recently were able to announce, which is super exciting. I'm going to share.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Jump in,
I
because
jump ahead?
the next, I love, this is like music, right? It just musically just goes right to the next. So the next question I was going to ask was, what are you excited about, right? Because obviously government funding, there's reductions there, but there's so many opportunities for private sector, family offices and other organizations to step in to fill the gap. Yeah. So I think that's the power of what innovation means in connectivity and the consciousness around lifting up women and children and all the needs globally for what we need. So please jump into what is so exciting.
Yeah, and I think as we do that, right, like we've been apolitical since our founding, right, since 75 years. We've had the support of every U.S. president since our founding. Publicly stated, we have lots of, in most countries, when many other organizations are exited, UNICEF stays because we are apolitical. Causes plenty of other challenges of things we can and can't say, and urgency, and all sorts of other things that you can imagine, but it is the core of us doing our work, right? So when we think about the public sector, it's a very complex space, but we know it very well. As we think about the opportunity for public-private partnerships and really also keeping the core of who we're serving as part of that circle, not just like that we deliver a solution that public and private entities have thought up, but that we have human beings at the core of it, is really powerful. So we just announced a $500 million commitment from the Bezos family, which has been phenomenal. Yes, I was just saying. We have an incredible team that has led that for many years. Fantastic. Yeah, well, actually, a family gift. His parents were really critical there as well. But it's been the idea is also to incentivize, to address a really big pressing challenge, which is undernutrition for children. It's a life-saving intervention, and we believe that we can actually end undernutrition, right? So when we think about that and we bring them to the challenge, right, and then we bring others to the challenge, they're hoping to incentivize governments around the world to make the right investments in nutrition. So they're matching that. They're also matching private sector donations. Yes. And we're trying to do work smarter because we're also having an influx and we can buy things cheaper when we buy in bulk and when we buy them in different paces. So just to also connect that back to that's the academic exercise and the people who like really have good financial think about how we structure that financial mechanism. That's been a lot of the negotiation as well. But what does it mean for one human being, right? And I had the opportunity to travel to Ethiopia when my first daughter, I have 3 girls, was...
Yay, girls.
Yes, girl power. We got lots of girl power in our house. I'm going to get some tips because I have a brother. So my oldest daughter was about 14 months, back when you were counting by months. She was super little. And I was nervous. It was my first time leaving her. And of course, I left her with my husband, and then my mom showed up, and they had like 20 people there taking care of my one daughter, right? Who was super juicy, but I still felt that like, I'm leaving her. And I also felt a little bit of nervousness about going to a place where I knew there were real challenges of basic survival for children. And the thought of looking at another child really candidly that was in dire need I was sort of feeling like, how am I going to sort of contain my own emotions? I'm going as a professional, not as, bringing donors and thinking about what that is. And I was really surprised, I think, by what my own sentiment was. And I went to, it was on the border of Sudan. So most of the women there, it was almost all women with children, had walked 2 to 3 days, some upward of a week or more, to get to safety. So they were in Ethiopia, right at the border, and getting immediate intervention, just like basic life-saving assessment. Do you have enough food? Do you have water? Any health needs? Immediate. And this was like a receiving center, if you will, to assess that. And I walk in, and there's about 20 women sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding children of various ages. Did not speak the same language. None of them spoke English. And I sat down in front of this woman, and she's holding a baby, and I thought, okay, well, I have an 18-month-old. You kind of do that math in your head, like, how old is this baby? You don't know. And I assumed the baby was about 6 months old. And I began talking to her, and she was feeding the baby the micronutrients, which is exactly what this gift that we've now just announced is supporting. So these packets cost about 35 cents, give or take, right? So it's a little silver packet, a peanut butter paste. You probably, yeah. So it has a micronutrient that can help children. And I looked in her eyes, and I looked at the child, and I think that was the part I thought I had been preparing myself for, and the child looked okay to me. And the mom was sitting there, and I thought, I can't imagine not having just like the basics to help my child survive when it was like a 34-cent thing. Like I just actually, even if I had 34 cents, I couldn't have gotten it, right? So how do you make sure that exists and make sure the child receives it?
Yes.
And I just looked, and I think, like, it's all she wants for her kid.
Yep.
So we leave, and we have the conversation after, and I find out a little bit more about her story. And, of course, the child is the same age as my daughter. Yeah. And I had a moment, as anybody would. And I processed that it's not just having enough food. It's now stunting, right? This child hasn't grown. The brain development for under 5 hasn't taken place. These interventions are not just life-saving, they're intergenerational change. They change communities, economies, conflict, right? Like if children are not productive, you have desperation and economic. It affects the GDP, right? So you get into the academic exercise again. But that woman will be in my head for the rest of my life.
Forever.
Yeah.
So a conference wouldn't be a conference in this age without an AI question. So it's an opportunity to quickly tag what you just talked about in the power of innovation, right? So organizations being not reactive, but proactive in terms of what the possibilities are to amplify your mission, your power, and the life-changing work that you do. So please talk about the amazing partnership that you're stepping into with OpenAI. And also, I think the power of knowing that innovation and innovative thinking exists within an organization like yours. It's not just the folks who do AI for a living. The knowledge and the importance of having that wisdom exists in-house. So talk about that.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's something I think that is often surprising, not just to the people that work with us, but even as we engage with pretty powerful tech partners, they're like, oh, you have a lot of expertise, you know? I went to school for engineering. I'm a bit of a tech junkie. I like play with all the new toys just for fun. That's like my side gig, right? I think if I had, 20 hours of free time, I'd probably spend them on playing with AI tools. Anyway, but there is so much. I think, I think as we were wrapping up the last session, if I could have a magic 8-ball about what would happen with AI, I'd probably not be sitting here right now. But I think that what we can do is not just about efficiency in offices, about there's health interventions, all sorts of things happening across the world, right? But when you think about even AI and digital education, just as one really simple example, right? So we're working with OpenAI to work on digital education tools. So you can adapt for languages, you can adapt for culture, you can make sure that they're evolving quickly and learning, right? So if you have children on the move, let's say, right, where you don't have children that are having consistent educational interventions, digital education becomes a way to help us address a massive backfall coming out of the pandemic, right? So education globally, we all know this in the US as well, had massive drop-offs. So our team has come together, OpenAI, we're working with Microsoft, we're working with Google, and I think what they're seeing is they're actually shaping some of their work slightly differently based on the expertise that we're bringing to this conversation on what works in education, because most of the digital education tools have not been particularly tested, right? Like if you think about like what's most effective, and I see some nodding from some of our younger people, I was like, I'd love to ask all of you. And I know it from my own kids, right? It's some things are effective, some are not, and we put tools out there without really understanding that. And so I think the private sector is eager to get that knowledge. It's not that they're not interested. They have a sort of different primary charge. And when we come together and talk about what the challenges are and how we solve it, there's an opportunity. And I think the expertise on our teams, bringing the innovation space and carving out within bigger organizations places to move quickly, to adapt, to shift financing, to what starts to matter, whether we're talking about diploma and certifications and how we track that, or whether we're talking about the actual digital tools. And those have applications globally. They have local context. It matters how you use them. But we can do both at the same time. And I think that's what's super exciting to me. And being really thoughtful at the same time about the risks.
That's right.
Because there are some. And I think none of us would say there aren't. We talk a lot about digital access for kids and what that means. So I think we come as a resource as we advise. And then we also sort of push the envelope at the same time to make sure we're doing what is needed, which is a huge challenge at scale for kids.
I'd like to stick a pin. I don't know if Dan Costa's in the room, but I would love to hear more. Hi, Dan. But like the power of AI for good, because again, that's where that intelligence from where you all sit in the landscape with localization, knowing what's happening on the ground, informing and having a seat at the table for those conversations. So I'm making a plug.
Yes, let's
for
do
you to
it.
come back. Note taken. And so we're going to end on a high note, folks, because obviously everything that's happening in the world is heavy, right? We don't have shoulders big and broad enough to carry the weight of what's happening in our own lives, what's happening in the world. But there's always hope and hopefulness when you look in the eyes of a mother who's grateful for the 34-cent, food item for their child, to have a possibility for another day, right? So take us home in terms of what power do we have as individuals, as a community? Obviously, you talked about the great things happening with organizations, but what difference can we make or what a call to action as we walk out of this room and think about what you are going to leave us with today?
Whew, big one.
You can do it.
Yes,
I have
thank
faith in you.
Thank you. So I was sort of feeling that same weight myself, lots of heaviness, and I had the opportunity just a few weeks ago, as I mentioned, to travel. And one of the girls that I met was a 15-year-old girl, and her name's Kadi. And I met her in Senegal, and she was at a community center telling us about her story, her personal story. And she wasn't actually telling us, I should say. She was telling her peers. So imagine an after-school center, a community center. There's judo going on in the background. There's kids sitting on the floor with their siblings, their cousins, their friends. And they're listening to this girl who's 15 years old standing up and talking about a really personal experience with FGM, which is female genital mutilation. So it's cutting. It's extremely widespread globally, and something that children almost never talk about. Again, not over-indexing on my own personal story, but I can't imagine as a 15-year-old standing up in front of my class talking about menstruation, let alone talking about FGM and what that is. And she, with the confidence that I don't know that I've ever had in my life, got up and talked to her peers, UNICEF leaders, all of us international visitors, not even speaking. She almost did it in English. She wrote her poem that she wanted to share with us in English, but shared it in her language as she sort of felt more comfortable. And she talked about how not how she was going to, how she was changing that norm in her community right now because of her beliefs, her own beliefs, and her determination of what was right. And what she was getting out of that community center was the skills and the support to do that advocacy in a way that was safe, not 100% safe. It's pretty risky to go door to door to parents who believe in something very strongly and help your friends and your peers convince their parents to do something different. But she had the support there. And I went over and I talked to her on the side afterwards, and she told me she was actually 7 years old when she was cut. And you can say the heaviness of that, right? Which is what I felt. And she said, and I'm not going to let it happen anymore. And I get up every day and I'm going to do it. And she showed me with pride the tablet where she wrote her poem that she won from a national coding competition. She should be on that AI panel with us, by the way. And she said, we are going to change this. I'm going to change this. And what you may not know is UNICEF also trained Malala as an advocate. And so what we look at is we say, who are our leaders of today? And are they doing enough? Are they doing what they need to? And I think we take a cross-section that is very limited when we define leaders. She is not our leader of tomorrow. She's our leader of today. All of you here are leaders of today.
In this room.
In this room, right? Not just young people. Like, we are the leaders. We can do something. Whether we can make a $500 million gift, come find me if you can. But if you cannot, right, there are things you can do. You can give financially. You can stand up. You can speak in your own community. You can be a good global citizen. You can do the things. I think we've been hearing so much paralysis.
Yeah. No.
It's not okay.
No.
We can do stuff.
We can do it.
Yes. Take a minute.
Each of us in this room
Each of us
represents a possibility. Listen, we woke up this morning, and what an amazing privilege to have just woken up this morning. So that's the attitude I have every day. So you got to do one thing for somebody else, right, to change the world. And you can do it by changing one person, touching one person, impacting. So thank you for talking to us about the power of seeing humanity, meeting them where they are, showing us what's possible, being so passionate about it on this stage. It's infectious. We appreciate you. We are grateful for you, for your team that's here, that came. And thank you all for being great audience. And let's give a round of applause to Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you.